Thank you for the introduction. Always good to test. Good. Before I jump in, I just want to extend a huge thank you to the whole team who's put this together because it's been flawless. You know, for everyone in the audience, we may seem just like professional speakers who are coming out here and just pulling this out of our pocket, but we have two outstanding coaches sitting here in the audience who have helped us along the way, and a huge thank you to them as well. In June 2017, I arrived to training for the first day of my first job after graduating from college. That summer, I would be leading hiking trips for middle school students for an outdoor adventure camp. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and honestly, I thought I was in way over my head. I arrived and was immediately surrounded by 200 of the most charismatic, outgoing, friendly, and intelligent people I had ever met. What was I doing here? That first afternoon, we had a big group training session, and that was where I was first introduced to the story of Merit Levitan. Back in 2013, Merit had signed up for a cross-country bike trip through this same camp. She had just graduated from high school and wanted a challenging adventure before heading off to college that fall. So, for 7 weeks before heading off to college, she would ride from South Carolina with a group of other high schoolers to Santa Monica. A huge feat. 2 weeks into the trip, early July, Merit and her group had made it to Arkansas. They were right on pace. They were welcomed by wide open roads, perfect weather, even a little bit of a tailwind, believe it or not. And one day, a driver traveling on the same road as Merit and her group decided to take their eyes off the road for 4 seconds. In that time, this driver struck the back of Merit's group, injured 3 members of the group, and killed Merit. That pause I just took was 4 seconds. That is all it takes to do something totally needless, like sending a text message and ending someone's life. Merit never made it to the West Coast, never went to college, never lived the rest of her life. Now, I was told this story to add gravity to what I was about to be doing for the summer. I was suddenly given the biggest responsibility you can ever imagine. A set of parents was trusting me with the most important thing in their life, their child. This responsibility was both incredibly overwhelming, but it was also empowering. Every student that I would be leading that summer represented a family that trusted in me and believed in me to do a great job as a leader. And so it gave me the confidence and conviction to do a great job. Leading that summer, it was only 8 weeks, was the hardest thing I have ever done. But it was the most rewarding by far. I stuck around this organization for the next 4 years, working full-time because I loved what the mission was. And during those 4 years, I got to know Merit's story a whole lot better. I met her family. I heard stories about what she was like growing up, what she liked to do. She was adventurous. She loved trying new things, challenging herself, and she was fully present in everything that she did. Merit, rather than worrying about the noise and distractions that are constantly around us, was looking at what was right in front of her. She was listening to the people she loved that surrounded her, and she was living life, as her mom likes to say, in real time. So getting to know Merit's story a lot better, by the time I wrapped up my work at this camp, I wanted to do something about this problem, this distracted driving problem that is so prevalent in this country. And I also wanted to honor the way that Merit lived her life. because Merit lived her life eyes up right until the moment where someone else had their eyes down for 4 seconds. So what better way to do that than to ride my own bike, as Kaya, spoiler alert, alluded to, than riding my own bike across the country. So I set out on a 7,000-mile bike ride around the United States to raise awareness for distracted driving. And along the way, and since starting the ride, I've spoken to hundreds of people, communities, organizations, and schools about this problem. And in the weeks and months after having met some of these folks, they've come up to me or sent me an email, let me know that because they heard this story, they've changed their habits in the car. They're not looking at their phone when they should be focusing on the road. And distracted driving is a really hard problem to address and to measure impact of. But even if one person's change in habits resulted in one life being saved, then this mission has been successful. Now, the ride was incredibly challenging. Some days I'd wake up in my tent with wet gear all around me. It's pouring rain outside. The idea of spending 8 hours in the saddle was horrible. I would often be scared of the risks of being exposed on the road, knowing Merit's story, and I just didn't know what each day would bring. But because I was putting myself out there in a vulnerable, uncomfortable position and doing something that I believed in, I opened myself up to the kindness of strangers. And in some instances, I actually was relying on the kindness of strangers to continue moving on this journey. In Kansas, one night I was staying in this big campground on a reservoir and was getting ready for bed. I was walking back from the bathhouse, toothbrush in hand, getting ready to crawl into my tent, when this couple sitting out by a camper van yelled at me and called me over for pie and ice cream that they had just prepared in a Dutch oven on their campfire. They wanted to hear what the heck I was doing on a bike in the middle of Kansas, and they also wanted to share stories from their time at this campground and in Kansas where they've lived their whole life. Kansas is special to them because so many people write it off as a flyover state. In Ohio, a little bit earlier in the trip, one day I had done a less than ideal job planning my logistics for the day. I found myself in the middle of cornfields and no place to stay for the night. So I knocked on the door of a house nearby, and this farmer named Joe, without hesitation, let me camp in his yard for the night. Later that night, we watched the sun set over all of these fields that he maintains himself year-round. And in Utah, the high point of the trip, I had to get over a 9,000-foot mountain pass in early October. Unfortunate timing, the first winter storm of the year is on that day. I'm climbing up to 9,000 feet. I get to the top of this mountain pass. It is 10 degrees. It is snowing, windy. There's ice forming on the sides of the road. My bike frame is caked in this muddy ice layer, and my face covering had ice crystals forming around where I was breathing. It was freezing. I start going down and quickly realize that I cannot continue without risking being totally frozen and risking not being able to stop my bike. A Native American family pulled over and drove me and my bike down to a place where I could safely resume riding. These are just 3 examples from my trip from when I had experienced the kindness of strangers. And I have so many other examples. And the common thread between all of these is the simple human connection that is so often missed, but is so powerful. Now, I made it 3 months through this trip, about 100 days. I was on pace, thinking I would be done with the trip in the next 2 months. When the coastal hills of Oregon, if you've ever experienced them, they got my legs good. I had a knee injury that took me off the bike for 6 months. I was back home in Connecticut for 6 months when this bike trip is the only thing that I have planned for my life at that moment. Incredibly frustrating. This setback and this plot twist helped me to realize that this eyes up thing is about so much more than just distracted driving. Eyes up, which is what I called the trip, is a metaphor for life. It's a way of life. For those 100 days, every single day, I was literally looking at what was right in front of me and the surroundings, the cars, the risks that I was facing. I was listening to the strangers that I was talking to my own gut when making critical decisions in each day. And I was living life in the purest definition of what it means to be present. And so none of these experiences that I had I could have found on a phone or in a book or seen online. They're right in front of you. And while I would never expect or encourage anyone necessarily to spend 3+ months on a bike, we can all start living a little bit more eyes up today. I want you all to ask yourself, how are you living eyes up in your everyday life? Are you looking at the beauty that's right in front of you? Because I know for sure that each and every one of you has something beautiful in your life that you may not be looking at, but it's right there. Are you listening to the people that you love and to your heart? And are you living life in real time? Living eyes up is simple. There are so many different ways that you can start doing it today. Could be something as simple as putting your phone in your bedroom while you're in the kitchen making some awesome tacos. Or maybe your phone's in your backpack while you're talking to your professor. Or your phone is just somewhere else when you're talking to your friends or family. You're just being present in that moment. And most importantly, I hope you all consider putting the phone down, turning on driving focus while you're in the car, and you're just focused on what's right in front of you when you're behind the wheel, because nothing is that important. So ask yourself, how can I live a little bit more eyes up today? Thank you.